Okay, good afternoon. It is my pleasure to introduce today's featured speaker. It's the winner of the 2016 American Schooner Association Voyager Award. Not exclusively, but in particular for our remarkable circumnavigations of the Americas. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce Richard Hudson.
Thank you. Gotta say, it's great to be back at an ASA meeting. It's been about 10 years since I've managed to be to one. It was great to meet up with a lot of people last night that I haven't seen for 10 years and meet a whole bunch of new people, and I hope to meet the rest of you later today. If my volume is not good enough, please just raise your hand like that, and I'll speak up or get the mic closer. When Paul and I were talking about what exactly I'd discuss today, I was thinking, well, mystic, early February, it's going to be cold, snow, ice. Let's talk about sailing someplace cold. Patagonia. I've wanted to go to Patagonia for a long time. It's an awesome place. How many of you have been there? 1, 2. It's great. It's wild. It's remote. It's kind of untamed. Lies at the bottom of South America, comprising the southern parts of Argentina and Chile, sitting there in the roaring 40s with the furious winds hitting the coast all the time. The coastal weather is cold, wet, and windy. It's a very challenging place to sail to. My boat, I bought in France. It's a 50-foot steel staysail schooner. It's specifically designed for sailing to Antarctica. And sister ships charter out of Argentina and Chile to sail to Antarctica, and also do charters in Greenland. What's unusual about this boat, besides the fact that it's very strongly built, is that all the ballast is in this centerboard, 4.5 tons of lead. It also is the biggest fuel tank in the boat, 650 liters, which is about 150 gallons. And the centerboard trunk goes all the way up to the deck, so if the cable breaks, you can just go down from the deck and replace it. This centerboard gives you good stability under sail when you put that ballast way down low. So my sailing draft is 10.5 feet. The centerboard must be down and locked. There's a 1-inch pin to lock it in place. It must be down and locked when you sail, otherwise if you heeled over, the board would come up, the boat would roll over, everyone would die, and it would be a bad day. So it's not a really forgiving boat. It's a very useful boat. The centerboard lets you get into shallow places with the motor, because when you bring it up all the way, the draft is 1.3 meters, more than 4 feet, but less than 5 feet. And if you're trapped in ice, the shape of the hull is such that the hull should pop up. And when you raise the centerboard, that's less for the ice to grab. So that was another reason for the centerboard. So it's very much a high latitude voyaging boat. And I did an 8-year indirect circumnavigation of the Americas in this boat, starting in France, where I bought the boat. Today, I'm going to talk about this part from Vancouver. After I went through the Northwest Passage, I worked in Vancouver for a couple of years, and down to Mexico, to Easter Island, to Patagonia in Chile, and through Patagonia. I quit my job in 2014 and worked full-time on the boat for 6 months getting it ready, because you know how much work boats are. And then in September, we left. John Parker, who a lot of you know, was with me for the first leg from Vancouver to San Francisco. I believe he is going around Cape Horn on a charter boat right now. I had different crew at different times during the voyage. Sailing south on the California coast is really nice. The wind is always from the north. So just fantastic place to sail south on. I would not want to sail north, but it's a great way to sail south. And you got nice weather, and you got all these whales. And this is a fin whale. about 50 feet long, so same length as the boat, and they're quite content to swim along at the same speed as the boat, close to the boat, for many minutes at a time, sometimes close to an hour. Really nice to see. Early October, hurricane season was winding down, but the week before, Cabo San Lucas here in La Paz had just been hit by a Category 3 hurricane. I wanted to get south, so we stayed offshore, very much kept an eye on the weather forecasts, and on where possible anchorages were in case another hurricane came up, and then got up into the Sea of Cortez and cruised in the Sea of Cortez for a bit. The Sea of Cortez is an awesome place. How many people have been there? Yeah, several. Yeah, you know what I mean. You got mountains, desert, and sea. Hardly any people. It never rains. You got good diving. You can fish. And every once in a while you can go to a marina, there's a few of them, and fill up your water tanks with reverse osmosis water to get your drinking water. And I could just enjoyably cruise for many months there. Some people do it for years. And you can get there by trailer boat from the US, or you can get there with an ocean-going boat from the Pacific. From Mexico, we went a little ways west, and then basically south to Easter Island. Now, my goal was Chile, to go to Patagonia. But the reason for Easter Island was mostly the winds, because in the South Pacific high dominates the winds, and in the Southern Hemisphere, winds go counterclockwise around a high. If I'd gone the coastal route, I'd be fighting the southeast trades. So it made more sense to come out and partly circle around the high, and then take the roaring 40s westerlies to Chile. And when you're doing that, Easter Island is pretty much on the route. And there's a similar story with the currents. If the equatorial currents kind of counter each other out, one goes east, one goes west, but if you were to go down the coast off Peru and Chile, you're fighting the Humboldt current, and it just makes more sense to stay out at sea and go to Easter Island. The ITCZ, the Intertropical Convergence Zone, which used to be called the doldrums, has a lot of calms, but it really has a lot of shifting winds. So the wind, it's a lot of sail changes, and you do a lot of motoring in calms too, but the wind just light, moderate, medium, heavy, lots of squalls, lots of thunderstorms, lots of squalls. Nice thing after the squall is you get these nice rainbows. And during the squall, assuming you've got the sails down in time, you'd better do that. You got all this pouring fresh water, you can have a nice wash, rinse yourself off, get clean. After the ITCZ, it was 3,000 miles close-hauled on port tack. So we got very used to leaning over to the starboard side. Now, Easter Island, it's called Rapa Nui by the inhabitants, and Isla de Pascua by Chile, which annexed Easter Island in 1888. Easter Island was settled somewhere around 1200 AD. The first European visitor was a Dutch explorer, Jacob Roggeveen, on Easter Sunday, 1722. So he called it Easter Island. And this, as you notice, this chart's like 100 years old. And I really like the old charts because they've got the view from seaward. So back, for everyone who remembers what it was like to navigate before GPS, when you come up to some place and you're looking, oh yeah, well there's a hill, there's a hill, there's a hill. Which one is which? Yeah. And so the old charts, I liked how they had these pen and ink drawings of how the coast looks from sea, so you can figure out what it is you're looking at. And they do have more accurate charts than this nowadays for Easter Island. There's lots of parts of Patagonia and Chile that they don't have more accurate charts, but they do here. And another thing you'll notice about this chart is the lack of harbors. The only harbor really, there's a little small boat harbor, and that's for like at most 30-foot boats, it is often closed. I spoke to a cruise ship passenger who was on her 4th cruise to Easter Island, and this was the first time she had gone ashore, because all the tenders, the cruise ships anchor out, and then all the tenders go in this little small boat harbor, and once the waves are big, they're crashing over the breakwater, and you can't get in and out of the harbor. The Chilean Navy requires that you always keep someone aboard capable of moving the boat at all times, because you basically just have to go to one anchorage or another as the wind and waves require. Not all yachts follow that rule of keeping someone aboard, and some of them drag anchor and end up on the sharp volcanic rocks. This is one of the anchorages, and you can see it's not a great anchorage. It's a fair row in. And another thing that makes anchoring interesting in Easter Island is that the waves don't come from the wind that you have at Easter Island. The waves are swell generated from far off storms, and they can be an entirely different direction from the wind on the island. So if you're ashore, it doesn't tell you anything that the wind is picking up or that the wind is changing direction. You have no clue what might be happening with the actual waves. You got to get a wave forecast for that. But from this anchorage, you got a fair row in, as you can see, and then you get to this ladder. Now, you get to this ladder, and the waves are going up and down, like up to 6 feet. Beyond 6 feet, you can't do this. So you've got to time your row in, and the amount of water to raise the water level 6 feet, that's a lot of current in towards the rocks and back out again. So you got to time your paddling, get up there, grab the ladder, and climb up. And when the waves are this close to shore, are more than 6 feet, it really isn't possible to get on and off the dock. And you're just going to have to wait to get ashore to get back aboard. And that's a typical Easter Island anchorage. Easter Island's got a population of about 6,000 people. And the only town is called Hangaroa. And this is the farmer's market from Hangaroa. You can see the fruits and vegetables in the backs of the trucks. And in this one, you can see they've slaughtered a cow, and all the meat has been cut up, and it's just laying out in the hot midday sun with flies crawling all over it. But I've been at sea for over a month in a boat without refrigeration and no meat, and that is steak. So I bought a kilo, took it back to the boat, washed it off in the seawater, fried it up with some onions, and that was a really good steak. You can't judge a steak by the truck it comes in. What Easter Island's really known for are these statues. They were built between 1200 and 1680. Judging from the tourists in front of them, you get an idea as to their height. They weigh up to 82 tons. There are 887 of these that have been found and catalogued. About a quarter of them were moved away from where they were all carved. They were all carved with stone hand tools. They figure it took 5 or 6 men a year to carve each one. And they were all carved in this area at the side of an extinct volcano. It's not entirely sure. People are not entirely certain what these statues were for. During the 1800s, they were all the ones that were standing were knocked down in wars. And the 1800s was a really rough time for the population of Easter Island. During one decade, 97% of the population died due to slavery, tuberculosis, and smallpox. They may have had a written script, but few examples of it survive, and anyone who knew how to read it is dead. So there's not a written history that anyone understands. Where the people actually came from is also not certain. Probably they came from other Polynesian islands by sailing canoe. Possibly, or also, they came from South America by balsa raft. So, Who built these statues? Why? That's really still a mystery. There's lots of theories, but no one really knows. From Easter Island, we sailed south and then pretty much east to Chile. And at first the winds were light as we were still in the South Pacific high, and then as we got into the roaring 40s, they picked up and we had good sailing. We also had good fishing on this trip. These fish are both like this long, and you can sort of, there's a hammer in there you can get an idea of size with. Normally I only have one line out. This time I was trying to figure out which lure was better, so I had one line out each side of the boat, not realizing that then a school of tuna came by and they hit both lures. So you got no refrigeration, didn't have a lot of salt, and the conditions were not good for drying the fish on deck. So we ate tuna for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. 10 days of tuna. After which we were happy to get back to dried and canned food. And after that I only towed one line at a time. The way I've learned by losing a lot of lures across the seas is that everything is 400-pound test, at least, from the line, the swivel, a stainless steel leader this long. Everything is very strong. Otherwise, you don't notice when a fish grabs it because you're not actually monitoring it, and they break free. So I have the lines made off the cleats, and then I use a bungee cord. This is deflecting the line and giving a little spring when the fish hits. So it gets better. I would not say I'm a good fisherman, and most of the fish get away. But I've slowly improved over the years. This is the wind vane on the boat. A wind vane, most of you know, it's a mechanical device to steer the boat. And I don't have an autopilot. The boat came with an autopilot, but I got tired of fixing it, so I threw it away. And most of the 100,000 miles this boat has gone have been steered with this wind vane. It was built from plans in a French sailing magazine. And this red and yellow piece of plywood is a paddle. There's 3 different sizes for different wind speeds. This is the big one. And the way this works is you turn this base to point into where you want the wind to be from. And when the wind is from that direction, the paddle will be vertical. When the boat turns, then the paddle will be pushed down to one side or the other. And that goes through a linkage, which goes to a trim tab on a rudder, which then steers the boat. And this is a really good way of self-steering. Your boat must be balanced. It must want to stay a course. But it will look after self-steering very well in anything above 6 or 7 knots of wind. In lighter winds, I use sheet to tiller, which is a much more challenging method of steering, but works with all you need is a block and some rope. And with sheet to tiller, you make down all the sheets, and then one of the sheets, in this case I'm using the main sheet, but it could be any one, whichever has a good lead, you deflect it. So you tie a rope to it, a control line. To deflect the main sheet, you go to a turning block on the windward side of the boat, and then that ties to the tiller. And then you have a bungee cord on the leeward side of the boat, which also ties to the tiller. And the way this works, when the boat turns too close to the wind, then the angle between the wind and the boat gets tighter, and the wind you're feeling on the boat is stronger because the boat speed is more added to the true wind speed. So more wind speed means more pressure on the sails, which means more tension on the sheet. And more tension on the sheet pulls the control line, and it pulls the tiller to the windward side of the boat, and then the boat turns away from the wind. And when it goes too far away from the wind, I am exaggerating the angles here, then the pressure on the sails decreases because the boat's moved away from the wind and the boat's speed is not adding to the wind speed. And then the tension on the sheet decreases, And at that point, the bungee cord pulls stronger than the control line does, so the tiller goes away from the wind and the boat turns back up into the wind. And this is straightforward in theory, but it really takes a lot of practice to actually learn how to do this. If you want to go long distances and have a tiller, I would really encourage you learning sheet to tiller. I'll just warn you, it takes a lot of effort, but it's very reliable and doesn't take any electricity. This is how it looks in practice. I'm using 2 blocks actually just to get a better lead. Got a rolling hitch around the main sheet here. So the adjustment is how tight that rolling hitch is, and you can move it up and down a bit too. And then the bungee cord on the other side of the tiller. The adjustment there is take another turn around the tiller with the bungee cord to make it shorter, or add a second bungee cord. And perhaps easier to see, this is how it looks on a 26-foot sloop. You can see it deflecting the main sheet, going to the turning block, and a little bungee cord. It happened to be the only bungee cord I had on the boat, but it does work. So from Easter Island, we came in to Chile, and then went down the Patagonian coast of Chile to Ushuaia, Argentina. In more detail, we came between this big island called Chiloé and the mainland, and then turned and went 100 miles north to Puerto Montt. Now this channel between the island of Chiloé and the mainland gets 9-knot tidal currents. So you have to time your entry. And there's a whole bunch of highway ferries that cross that channel, and they're owned by different companies, so going to different docks. So there were half a dozen of these as we were going down with the current. And normally in a crossing situation, you expect the starboard vessel is the stand-on vessel. It does not alter course or speed. I don't actually know how these guys do this, because that is not the way they work. They also do not do this on the radio. I had no troubles. I stayed back and watched while they all crossed, but starboard vessel was not the stand-on vessel in the way these guys worked. I think everyone knows who everyone else is going to what dock, and everyone's angled into the current, and that's why it works. These guys obviously know what they're doing. But it was interesting to see different nav rules that I didn't understand. I just hung back and went behind them all. And then got in the biggest tidal race I'd ever seen. But no problems going through. Puerto Montt is pretty much the northernmost city. Maybe it's the northernmost city in Patagonia. Patagonia is kind of loosely defined as being 40 degrees south and farther. It's a city of 275,000 people. It was named after a Chilean president who encouraged German immigration. So there's a lot of people of German descent in Puerto Montt. And they're mostly they do fishing, fish farming, and transportation. It's also a place, a tourist hub. There's a lot of bus lines that run out of Puerto Montt. And the north of Patagonia has all these fish farms. And they make navigation at night really difficult. Fish farms are not marked on the chart like they are in the US. This fish, the only way they light these things is every maybe 50 meters or so, they've got 50 yards, they've got these lights, and they're flashing lights in a cross. You can't tell where the fish farm starts and ends. There will be multiple fish farms in an area. And they're held in place by steel anchor cables with these buoys along the anchor cables. The buoys are typically plastic and not lit, so not only do you not see them with your eye, they don't show up on radar. And all you've got is these occasional flashing lights on them. And it means if you don't know whether there's fish farms or not in a harbor, you really can't enter it at night. I did make the mistake of trying to enter one. We spent about 45 minutes trying to enter and 3 hours leaving. Being very thankful I had a chart plotter, but it was still very difficult to find our way back, because figuring out where one fish farm ends and another starts was at night. It's really hard. So you have to be careful not to navigate at night in Patagonia. From Puerto Montt took a little trip down here, a place called Yankaway. And there's a bunch of nice fjords there. This particular one has a few waterfalls in it. It's about a 3-mile long fjord. And this waterfall, you can take the boat right up to it. It's so deep that you can get the water coming onto the deck. There's always a current coming away from the waterfall from the water coming down. So you need to apply power to get that close. But it's neat. Nice way to wash the boat. You could fill your water tanks too, but it rains so much in Chile that filling your water tanks is just not a problem. For many years, I lived in New York and worked for banks. And this is the bank building in a little town we sheltered from a storm in. And it looks a lot different from a New York bank building. What I really liked about this is that the whole side of the bank building, they have devoted to a mural about recycling. I thought that was a neat use of a bank building. So, all in Spanish, of course. From there, we came and visited a small town called Machuque, and then went to the big island of Chiloé. And Machuque is a farming and fishing town, and it's just extremely relaxed. They're now doing a little bit of tourism, but this is what it looks like. Nothing happens very quickly here. It is very much a peaceful, enjoyable place, and very pretty. All the boats in Chile are designed to take the ground. So you see the little bilge keel on this one. They all have that. And a lot of the farms are subsistence farms. So they're just very small, and you don't need much money to live on a subsistence farm because the farm provides you with food, and it provides you with firewood and wood to build a house with. So you don't need that much cash. And as a result, these the oxes to drive a cart, I mean, oxen, they just go out to the pasture and eat grass. I mean, they don't cost anything. So this is really quite a feasible transportation method nowadays when on a subsistence farm. It just looks different from what I'm used to seeing. And this is a typical fish farm supply boat. They come in various sizes, but they all have pretty much this design. They've got a ramp at the bow, and what they do is at low tide, they come up, ground the boat, lower the ramp to the beach. A truck drives down on the beach, and a loader as well, and they transfer the freight between the boat and the truck. And then before the tide comes back in, the truck leaves, and the loader leaves, and then they float off with the tide. They also have a crane on the side, so they can pull up beside a fish farm, and the fish get led into a particular bag with handles on it, and then using the crane, they lift the fish out and bring them onto the supply boat. And I was just impressed by building a dinghy out of pieces of styrofoam, which is what these guys did. So I just thought it was neat. It's not really environmentally friendly, but it was an interesting idea. So I spent the winter in the biggest town on Chiloé called Castro. It's a town of about 20,000 people, and main industries there are farming, fish farming, and tourism. My boat is anchored right there.